Consider the modern sandwich. 2 slices of white bread, soft, fluffy, convenient. You eat the sandwich at noon. By 1 o'clock, the familiar sensation begins. A heaviness in the stomach. A slight swelling of the abdomen. The lethargy that modern people call the post-lunch crash. We have accepted this physical tax as normal. We tell ourselves that bread is inherently heavy. We tell ourselves that carbohydrates are the enemy. We have even invented a modern medical panic called non-celiac gluten sensitivity. We blame the wheat. We blame the gluten. We are blaming the wrong suspect. Look back 800 years. The medieval peasant did not treat bread as a side dish. Bread was the fuel of empires. A laborer in 13th century Europe consumed up to 2 kilograms of bread every single day. That is roughly 4 modern loaves daily. Yet, the historical record shows no evidence of mass bloating, no epidemic of lethargy, no widespread gluten intolerance. These populations built cathedrals without power tools. They marched across continents in heavy armor. They ran entirely on wheat, water, and salt. Here is the uncomfortable paradox. The medieval peasant, living in what we call a time of filth and ignorance, possessed a digestive health that the modern consumer can only dream of. The peasant could digest massive quantities of gluten and extract every ounce of mineral value from the grain. The modern consumer eats 2 slices and reaches for the antacids. What changed? The wheat has evolved, yes. But the wheat is not the primary killer. The killer is a thief that stole the most important ingredient in baking. That ingredient is time. In the quest for profit, the industrial food complex removed the natural fermentation process and replaced it with a chemical shortcut. They replaced a 24-hour biological digestion with a 2-hour chemical inflation. When you buy a packet of instant yeast, you are not buying a traditional baking tool. You are buying a laboratory isolate designed for speed, not for human biology. This is the story of how we broke the staff of life. This is the story of why your bread is effectively raw, and why the medieval baker knew secrets of microbiology that modern science is only just rediscovering. To understand the crime, one must examine the weapon. The weapon is Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the single strain of yeast found in every packet of instant yeast on the supermarket shelf. This organism is a marvel of industrial engineering. It is aggressive. It is fast. It is designed to do one thing: consume sugar and vomit carbon dioxide gas as quickly as possible. It puffs up the dough in 60 minutes. It creates the illusion of bread, but it does nothing to process the grain. This brings us to the first great lie of the modern bakery, the gluten myth. Millions of people today believe they are allergic to gluten. Unless a person has celiac disease, which is a specific genetic condition, the reality is often different. The human body struggles to digest the complex protein structure of gluten when that gluten is, effectively, raw. In a modern loaf, the gluten network is formed, but it is never broken down. The instant yeast inflates the dough, but the yeast does not digest the proteins. The consumer eats the bread. The consumer's stomach is then forced to do the heavy lifting that the fermentation pot should have done. The stomach bloats. The gut becomes inflamed. The body rebels. The modern consumer thinks the body is rejecting the wheat. In reality, the body is rejecting the shortcut. But the failure goes deeper than gluten. It reaches down to the molecular level of nutrition. A grain of wheat is a seed. A seed does not want to be eaten. A seed wants to survive, to grow into a plant. To protect itself, the wheat kernel contains a defense mechanism called phytic acid. Imagine phytic acid as a microscopic handcuff. This molecule travels through the digestive system and locks onto essential minerals: calcium, magnesium, iron, zinc. Phytic acid binds to these minerals and clamps them shut, preventing the human body from absorbing them. You can eat whole grain bread full of nutrients, but if the phytic acid is still active, those nutrients pass right through you. You are starving while you eat. The modern yeast packet has no key to this handcuff. Saccharomyces cerevisiae cannot break down phytic acid effectively, so the modern, healthy whole wheat bread is often a mineral trap. Now, look at the medieval mixing bowl. The medieval baker did not have packets of isolated yeast. The medieval baker used leaven, or what we now call a sourdough starter. This was not a single isolate. This was a wild, chaotic, beautiful ecosystem. A sourdough starter contains wild yeasts, yes, but more importantly, it contains a bacteria called lactobacillus. Lactobacillus is the hero of this story. When flour and water sit together for 12, 18, or 24 hours, the lactobacillus begins to feast. It consumes the sugars and produces lactic acid. This acidification is the key. This acid does two miraculous things. First, the acid attacks the gluten network. It begins to dismantle the tough protein structures, pre-digesting the bread before it ever touches the human tongue. By the time a true sourdough loaf enters the oven, the work of digestion is already half done. Second, and most critically, the lactobacillus holds the key to the handcuff. The bacteria produce an enzyme called phytase. Phytase destroys phytic acid. It unlocks the handcuffs. It releases the iron. It releases the zinc. It releases the calcium. The medieval fermentation process transformed a defensive seed into a bioavailable superfood. The medieval baker did not know what a molecule was. The medieval baker did not know what an enzyme was. But the medieval baker knew that if the dough did not sit for a full day and night, the bread would sit heavy in the belly. They knew that speed was the enemy of nourishment. We have traded this wisdom for a packet of powder that promises bread in an hour. We saved time, but we lost the food. Skeptics may argue that this is merely romantic nostalgia for a brutal past. Science disagrees. The evidence is not just anecdotal. The evidence is academic and archaeological. Research published in the Journal of Cereal Science and studies conducted by the University of Bari have confirmed the mechanism of the past. These studies demonstrate that long fermentation sourdough drastically reduces the toxicity of gluten for sensitive individuals. In controlled experiments, bread fermented for 24 hours showed a near-total degradation of the specific peptides that trigger immune responses in non-celiac gluten sensitivity. The science confirms that the medieval baker, working by instinct and tradition, was performing advanced biochemistry. Archaeology provides the physical proof. Look at the loaves preserved in the ash of Pompeii. The panis quadratus. These loaves are dense. These loaves are substantial. They required time to rise. Analysis of ancient brewing and baking sites reveals the use of barm, the foam from fermenting beer used to leaven bread. This barm was a rich soup of yeast and bacteria. The Roman legions marched on this bread. A Roman soldier received a ration of nearly 1 kilogram of wheat per day. The soldier boiled the wheat or baked the wheat. If the wheat had been an inflammatory toxin, the Roman Empire would have collapsed from malnutrition and chronic fatigue. Instead, the legions conquered the known world. The fuel was valid. The modern consumer can reclaim this power. The knowledge is not lost. The knowledge is merely ignored. The process requires no money. The process requires no electricity. The process requires only flour, water, and the patience to wait. To begin, one must capture the invisible. Wild yeast and bacteria are everywhere. They are on the skin of the grape. They are on the husk of the grain. They are floating in the air of the kitchen. Mix equal parts whole grain flour and water in a glass jar. Stir the mixture. Cover the mixture with a cloth to let the air in, but keep the flies out. Wait. In 24 hours, remove half of the mixture and add fresh flour and water. Repeat this ritual. Feed the mother. By day 5 or day 6, a transformation occurs. Bubbles appear. The volume doubles. A sour, sharp, alcoholic scent rises from the jar. This is not rotting. This is life. This is the capture of a wild colony that will work for the baker forever. Consider the mathematics of independence. A packet of commercial yeast costs money every single time bread is baked. The commercial yeast is a subscription service to the industrial food complex. The sourdough starter is a one-time investment of $0. Once the colony is established, the colony is immortal. There are starters in bakeries in San Francisco and France that have been alive and feeding families for 150 years. The medieval model is a model of infinite return on investment. The modern model is a model of perpetual consumption. There is a profound arrogance in the modern timeline. The modern world looks back at the medieval era and sees only darkness, plague, and ignorance. The modern world assumes that because the medieval peasant had no smartphone, the peasant had no intelligence. This is a fatal error. The medieval craftsman was a master of applied physics. The medieval baker was a master of applied microbiology. These ancestors did not survive by accident. These ancestors survived because they understood the fundamental laws of nature. They understood that nature cannot be cheated. They understood that speed often comes at the cost of substance. The packet of instant yeast is a perfect symbol of the modern condition. It promises a result without the effort. It promises the aesthetic of bread without the nutrition of bread. It is a hollow victory. The modern diet is filled with these hollow victories, foods that look perfect, taste sweet, but leave the body starving and inflamed. The path of the medieval way is not about reenactment. It is not about wearing costumes. It is about recovering the lost algorithms of survival. It is about looking at a jar of bubbling flour and water and recognizing it as a superior technology to the chemical factory. Reject the timeline of the consumer. The consumer pays for speed and eats poison. Become the craftsman. The craftsman invests time and eats medicine. The jar is waiting. The air is full of life. Catch it. Bake the true bread. And never apologize for the time it takes to build a strong body.